Boulder sits at the base of the Flatirons, ringed by 43,000 acres of protected open space, more preserved land surrounding the city than the city itself occupies. From above, it looks less like a metro area and more like a national park with a small town inside it. No skyscrapers, no sprawl, no strip malls bleeding into the foothills. Every other American city spent the last 60 years chasing growth, annexing land, widening highways, building upward and outward. Boulder did the opposite. But the strange part is not that Boulder chose to stop growing. The strange part is what happened because it did. The city that wrote the playbook on environmental preservation accidentally built one of the most exclusive communities in America, a place so expensive that 60,000 workers commute in every day because they cannot afford to live where they work. The very policies designed to protect the landscape ended up undermining the goals they were created for. The boom that scared a city. In the 1950s, Boulder was a quiet college town of about 20,000 people. The University of Colorado anchored the local economy. The Flatirons rose behind campus like a wall of tilted stone, and beyond them, the foothills climbed into the Continental Divide. It felt permanent, unhurried, the kind of place where the mountains set the pace. Then everything accelerated. The university expanded rapidly, adding departments, buildings, and thousands of students. Federal laboratories moved in, drawn by the altitude, the clear skies, and the proximity to Denver's growing infrastructure. IBM built a plant. The National Center for Atmospheric Research chose a mesa above the city for its headquarters. Rocky Flats, the nuclear weapons facility, opened just 16 miles to the southeast. Population tripled between 1950 and 1970, growing at roughly 6% per year, doubling every 11 and a half years. That kind of growth changes a place fast. The foothills that had always defined Boulder's skyline were suddenly being surveyed for subdivisions. Roads crept toward the mountains. Developers drew plans for high-rises downtown. Apartment blocks and parking lots replaced old farmland on the edges of town. Orchards that had stood for decades were bulldozed in a single afternoon. The open fields between Boulder and the neighboring towns began to fill in, the gaps closing like teeth growing together. Boulder was on track to become another Denver suburb, absorbed into the sprawl rolling north along the Front Range. If you had driven through in 1965 and come back in 1975, you might not have recognized the place. The same pattern was playing out in cities across the American West: Phoenix, Tucson, Albuquerque, every one of them swelling outward like ink on wet paper. Nobody stopped it. Nobody tried. But in Boulder, a group of citizens decided that was unacceptable. They would not fight growth with protests or petitions alone. They would use law, and they would start with a line nobody could see. The invisible wall. In 1959, Boulder voters passed an amendment that did something no American city had done before. They drew a line across their own map at 5,750 feet elevation, the blue line, and declared that the city would never extend water service above it. No water meant no development. No development meant the mountain backdrop would stay wild. It was an altitude limit disguised as a utility policy. Think about what that means in practice. A developer could own land on the slopes above town. The property might be beautiful, buildable, perfectly legal to subdivide. But without city water, it was worthless for housing. You could see the city below, see the lots marked out on paper, see the profit waiting to be made, but the water would never come. Engineers already had plans on the drawing board for a pumping system that would have pushed water up the slopes and opened the foothills to subdivisions. Without the blue line, those hillsides would have been carved into cul-de-sacs and driveways within a decade. The iconic view of the Flatirons rising above an open landscape, the image that defines Boulder on every postcard, every tourism brochure, every real estate listing, would have been replaced by rooftops. The blue line killed that future in a single vote. No construction crews, no court battles, no political drama, just a quiet line on a map that made the mountains permanently unbuildable. But the blue line only protected the mountains. The valleys and plains around Boulder were still wide open, and developers were circling. The foothills were safe, but the city's edges were not. Stopping sprawl uphill was only half the problem, and the harder half was still coming. Buying the edge. If the blue line protected the mountains, the next move protected everything else. In 1967, Boulder voters approved a 0.4% sales tax dedicated entirely to purchasing open space, one of the first voter-funded greenbelts in the country. Every purchase of a coffee, a pair of shoes, a tank of gas contributed a sliver toward buying the land around the city. And the city used it aggressively. Field by field, ranch by ranch, parcel by parcel, Boulder drew a hard green border that development could never cross. Not zoning it as protected, not restricting it through regulation, buying it outright, with public money, and locking it away permanently. When a rancher on the edge of town got an offer from a developer, the city sometimes stepped in with a counteroffer. Land that might have become a subdivision became a meadow trail instead. By the late 1990s, roughly 33,000 acres had been taken off the table. The physical footprint of Boulder was essentially fixed. The city could not sprawl outward, but it could still grow upward until 1971, when a citizen named Ruth Wright led a campaign to cap building heights at 55 feet. The campaign used photos of downtown Denver's skyline as a warning. This is what Boulder will become if we do nothing. Voters had already been shown a proposal that would have allowed up to 50 buildings as tall as 140 feet. They looked at that future, looked at the mountains, and chose the mountain views. No other American city taxed itself to buy its own greenbelt, capped its skyline, and drew an elevation line, all within 12 years. Boulder had built a container around itself, walls on every side, a ceiling on top. The landscape was locked in place, but people kept coming, and the container was about to be tested. The cap that wasn't in 1971, a ballot measure tried to cap Boulder's population at 100,000 people. It failed. Voters were not ready to put a hard number on their city. 5 years later, council member Paul Danish found a subtler path. His 1976 ordinance did not cap population directly. Instead, it limited new housing construction in larger projects to roughly 450 units per year, about 1.5% of the existing housing stock. Boulder became one of the first cities in America to slow growth not by stopping individual projects, but by rationing the right to build at all. The Greenbelt said where you could not build. The height limit said how tall you could not build. The Danish plan said how much you could not build, even on land that was technically available. 3 layers of restriction, each one reinforcing the others. But the most powerful growth control was never written into any ordinance. Over decades, Boulder layered its formal caps with something harder to name and almost impossible to repeal: friction, long permitting reviews, complex discretionary processes, zoning requirements that made even allowed projects slow, expensive, and uncertain. One local analyst calls it growth control by hassle, a system where the rules technically permit development, but the process makes it so painful that many builders simply give up. A developer might spend years and hundreds of thousands of dollars navigating reviews, public hearings, and design revisions before a single shovel hits dirt. Many never make it that far. They look at the timeline, look at the cost, and walk away. The formal growth cap became almost symbolic. By the 2020s, Boulder was rarely hitting its annual housing limit anyway, not because demand had faded, but because so few projects could survive the gauntlet. In 2024, the city formally repealed the growth cap under pressure from a new state law. Headlines announced the end of Boulder's anti-growth era. But almost nothing changed because the deeper fabric, the zoning, the height limits, the process hurdles, the greenbelt remained untouched. The cap was the headline. The hassle was the machine. 60,000 commuters. Here's what Boulder built. A city of roughly 107,000 residents with a daytime population of 167,000. Every morning, 60,000 workers drive in from cheaper suburbs like Longmont, Louisville, Broomfield, and Lafayette because they cannot afford to live in the city where they work. They sit on Highway 36 and the Diagonal, watching the Flatirons grow closer through their windshields, commuting into a landscape they were priced out of years ago. Boulder kept its mountain views, its greenbelt, its low skyline, its trails. But the jobs kept coming. The university employs thousands. Federal labs employ thousands more. Tech startups, Venture capital firms and biotech companies all wanted the Boulder address, the talent pool, the quality of life. The economy grew while the housing supply stayed frozen. The result is a city that markets itself as green and progressive, but generates tens of thousands of car commutes daily, pumping carbon into the atmosphere from the very sprawl its policies were designed to prevent. The teacher who works at a Boulder elementary school lives in Longmont. The nurse at the hospital lives in Broomfield. The cook at the farm-to-table restaurant on Pearl Street lives in Lafayette, driving past open space every morning that was preserved in the name of sustainability. The environmental math does not add up. The carbon cost of 60,000 daily commutes dwarfs whatever emissions a denser Boulder might have produced. One writer describes Boulder's trajectory as a slide from a generative city to an extractive one, where housing functions as an asset rather than shelter. And the people who own the city increasingly do not work in it. The people who work in it increasingly cannot afford to stay. The Aspen question. The demographic data tells a quieter but equally sharp story. Boulder's population growth has flattened. It may have peaked around 2016. Home prices and incomes keep rising. The median home price has pushed past $1 million in many neighborhoods. The share of families with children is shrinking. Young couples who might have bought a starter home in Boulder 20 years ago now look at the numbers and drive north to Longmont or east to Erie. The city is getting older and wealthier, not younger and more diverse. Walk through certain Boulder neighborhoods on a weekday afternoon and the sidewalks are quiet, not the quiet of a bad neighborhood, but the quiet of a place where many homes sit empty for months, owned by people who live somewhere else and visit when the weather is good. Critics inside Boulder now ask a question that would have been unthinkable to the original growth control generation. Is Boulder becoming Aspen? A beautiful, preserved, functionally gated community where the landscape is pristine, the politics are progressive, and almost nobody under 40 can afford to stay. There is active debate over whether to upzone single-family neighborhoods, relax height limits in certain corridors, or develop one of the last large parcels inside the city's sphere. But every proposal runs into the same wall. The residents who already own homes in Boulder have enormous incentive to keep the system exactly as it is. Their home values depend on scarcity. Their quality of life depends on low density. Their mountain views depend on height limits. Asking homeowners to vote for policies that would reduce their own property values is like asking someone to cut their own salary for the common good. It happens, but not often, and not at scale. The road not taken. What would Boulder look like if it had followed the standard American playbook? If it had annexed surrounding land instead of buying it as open space? If it had allowed mid-rise and high-rise construction instead of capping heights at 55 feet? If it had welcomed sprawl instead of fighting it? Look at what happened just down the road. Denver's northern suburbs, Westminster, Thornton, Broomfield, spread outward for decades, filling in the gaps between towns until the boundaries blurred into one continuous belt of rooftops and retail. Boulder could have joined that belt. It was heading that way in the 1960s. It might have become a larger, denser tech corridor, something closer to parts of Austin or the Denver suburbs. Housing would almost certainly be cheaper. More people could live near where they work. The commuter paradox would be smaller. But the Flatirons might be lined with condominiums. The foothills might be subdivisions. The greenbelt would be strip malls and parking lots. The mountain views that define the city would exist only in old photographs, the way they do in so many Western cities that once had spectacular backdrops and paved over every one of them. Boulder made a trade. It chose the landscape over affordability, views over density, preservation over access. Whether that trade was worth it depends entirely on who you ask, and whether you can afford to live there. The city that chose the view. Come back to the opening image. Boulder from above, 43,000 acres of open space ringing a small, low-slung city pressed against the mountains. No other city in America looks like this because no other city made the choices Boulder made. For 60 years, its residents voted, taxed, capped, and regulated their way to a landscape that most cities would never dare to protect. They fought developer after developer, ballot, measure after ballot measure, and they won every time. They succeeded. The mountains are wild, the skyline is low, the greenbelt is permanent, the trails are stunning. You can stand on the mesa above town at sunset and see nothing but open land stretching toward the peaks. No billboards, no subdivisions, no strip malls. It is breathtaking. And the workers who keep the city running drive in every morning from somewhere else, because the city that chose the view could not also choose to let them stay. Boulder is not the opposite of every American city because it failed. It is the opposite because it got exactly what it asked for, and discovered that the cost was something it never voted on.